The conference room on the 42nd floor of Sterling Global Corporation felt like a gladiator arena that morning. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table where 12 executives sat in expensive suits, their faces carefully blank. At the head of the table sat Harrison Blake. 38 years old, self-made billionaire, and the kind of man whose silence carried more weight than most people's speeches. Jessica Carter stood at the presentation screen, her cream blouse perfectly pressed, her dark hair pulled into a professional bun that somehow made her green eyes look even more striking. She had just finished presenting her marketing strategy for the company's expansion into the European market, a plan she had spent 3 months perfecting. The numbers were solid. The research was thorough. She knew it was good work. Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. He had built Sterling Global from a single office in Brooklyn to a multinational empire, and he had done it by being ruthless, precise, and utterly uncompromising. "The projections are optimistic," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Too optimistic." Jessica felt her spine straighten. "The data supports every projection in that presentation. Mr. Blake, I've accounted for currency fluctuations, regional buying patterns, and competitive interference." "You've accounted for what you can measure," Harrison replied. "What about what you can't?" "Consumer sentiment shifts, political instability, supply chain disruptions we haven't anticipated yet. Those variables exist in every market expansion," Jessica countered, refusing to back down. "If we wait for perfect conditions, we'll never move forward." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke to Harrison Blake like that. Nobody challenged him in front of the entire board. But Jessica had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let her ideas be dismissed without a fight. Harrison stood slowly, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket with deliberate precision. He walked around the table, his footsteps measured and deliberate, until he stood directly across from Jessica. The air between them felt electric, charged with something more than professional disagreement. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the room. "In this company, we deal in certainties, not hopeful thinking. Your work is adequate, but adequate doesn't drive billion-dollar decisions." Jessica's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "My work is more than adequate, and you know it. This strategy could increase our revenue by 40% over 2 years. Could," Harrison repeated, his eyes boring into hers. "That word has no place in this boardroom." He paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow more devastating. "The truth is, Miss Carter, you're replaceable. Everyone in this room is replaceable. If you can't deliver certainty, I'll find someone who can." The room went silent. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face, but something inside her snapped. She had spent 7 years at this company, climbing from an entry-level position to director through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights. She had sacrificed relationships, missed family events, and poured her soul into this place. And now this man, this cold, arrogant man, was reducing her to a disposable asset. She gathered her materials with steady hands, her movements calm despite the storm raging inside her. Then she looked Harrison Blake directly in the eye, and her voice came out clear and strong. "Then replace me, Mr. Blake." The executives around the table froze. Someone dropped a pen. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gray eyes, something Jessica couldn't quite read. "Excuse me?" he said softly. "You heard me," Jessica replied, her chin lifting. "If I'm so easily replaceable, then do it. Find someone better. Find someone who will tell you exactly what you want to hear instead of what you need to know. But don't waste my time or yours by keeping me here just to tear down everything I build." She turned toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had made it 3 steps when Harrison's voice cut through the silence. "Stop," it wasn't a request. It was a command that seemed to reverberate in the air itself. Jessica paused, but didn't turn around. Harrison closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. When he spoke again, his voice was so low that only she could hear it. a whisper that somehow felt more intimate than any touch. "You're not leaving here." "What?" Jessica's breath caught. She slowly turned to face him. And for the first time since she had started working at Sterling Global, she saw something other than ice in Harrison Blake's eyes. There was heat there, intensity, and something almost like fear. "This meeting is over," Harrison announced to the room without breaking eye contact with Jessica. "Everyone out. Miss Carter, my office. Now." The executives scrambled to leave, gathering their tablets and phones with barely concealed curiosity. Within seconds, the conference room was empty, except for Harrison and Jessica. The morning sun painting golden squares across the floor between them. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, her voice barely steady. "What I should have done months ago," Harrison replied. He moved closer, and Jessica could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, like cedar and rain. "You think I don't know your work is exceptional? You think I don't see how hard you push, how much you care about this company?" "You have a strange way of showing appreciation," Jessica said, trying to maintain her composure even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I do appreciation," Harrison said. "I do results. And you deliver results, Jessica. Every single time. That presentation was brilliant, and we both know it." Jessica blinked. "Then why did you just humiliate me in front of the entire board?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Because you're dangerous." "What?" "You make me want things I can't afford to want," he said. And there was something raw in his voice now, something vulnerable. "You make me question decisions I've spent 20 years perfecting. You walk into a room and everything else becomes noise. Do you have any idea how distracting that is?" Jessica's mouth went dry. "Mr. Blake, I don't know what you think this is, but I'm not interested in playing games. I came here to work, to build a career, not to be some kind of distraction for a bored CEO." "I'm not bored," Harrison said. And suddenly he was even closer. Close enough that Jessica could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "I'm terrified. Because for the first time in 20 years, I met someone who matters more than the next deal, the next acquisition, the next quarterly report. And I don't know what to do with that." Jessica's heart was racing now, her carefully constructed professional walls crumbling. "This is crazy. You don't even know me." "I know you take your coffee black with 2 sugars, Harrison said quietly. "I know you stay late every Thursday to mentor the new interns even though it's not in your job description. I know you send half your bonus check to your mother in Ohio, because she's still paying off medical bills from your father's surgery 3 years ago. I know you read mystery novels on your lunch break, and you're terrified of thunderstorms, but you never let anyone see it." Jessica stared at him, stunned. "How do you know all that?" "Because I pay attention," Harrison said. "Because from the moment you walked into your first interview, I haven't been able to stop paying attention. And it's killing me, Jessica. Because I built this empire by never letting anything distract me, by never letting anyone matter. But you matter, and I don't know how to handle that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed 42 floors below, oblivious to the seismic shift happening in this glass tower. Jessica's mind raced, trying to process what was happening, trying to reconcile the cold CEO she thought she knew with this raw, honest man standing in front of her. "I should go," she finally said. Though she didn't move, "You should," Harrison agreed. "But you won't, because I see it in your eyes, Jessica. You feel it too. This thing between us that neither of us asked for and neither of us can explain. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't lie awake at night thinking about what it would be like if things were different. Tell me, and I'll let you walk out that door right now." Jessica opened her mouth to say exactly that, to deny everything and retreat to the safety of professional boundaries. But the words wouldn't come, because he was right. God help her, he was right. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Probably," Harrison agreed. His hand lifted slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her skin. "But I've spent my whole life making calculated decisions. Playing it safe, building walls so high that nothing could touch me, and I'm tired, Jessica. I'm so tired of being alone in a crowded room." "I can't be your midlife crisis," Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're not?" Harrison said firmly. "You're the first real thing I've felt in 20 years. Stay. Work with me on the European expansion. Let me prove that what I said in there wasn't about your work. It was about me being an idiot who doesn't know how to handle having feelings for someone he shouldn't." "Shouldn't," Jessica repeated. "Because I work for you." "Because you scare me," Harrison corrected. "Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because when I look at you, I see everything I've been missing while I was busy conquering the business world." Jessica took a shaky breath. This was insane. This was her boss, her CEO, a man known for his ice-cold demeanor and ruthless business tactics. Getting involved with him could destroy her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for. But as she looked into his eyes and saw the vulnerability, there, the genuine emotion he was trying so hard to articulate, she felt something shift inside her. "One chance," she heard herself say. "You get one chance to prove this isn't just some power trip or boredom. One chance to show me that Harrison Blake is more than just a ruthless CEO." Something that might have been relief flooded Harrison's face. "One chance," he agreed. "That's all I'm asking for." As they stood there in the empty conference room, sunlight streaming through the windows and the city sprawling beneath them, neither of them realized they had just crossed a line that would change everything. Neither of them knew the challenges that lay ahead, the obstacles they would face, the price they would both pay for choosing to feel instead of just exist. But in that moment, with the space between them charged with possibility, it felt like the only choice that mattered. The days following their confrontation blurred together in a strange dance of professional collaboration and unspoken tension. Harrison had assigned Jessica as the lead on the European expansion project, which meant long hours in his office. Late nights reviewing market data and countless moments when their hands would brush over documents or their eyes would meet across the conference table, holding just a fraction too long. Jessica told herself she was being professional. She told herself that what happened in that conference room was just a moment of vulnerability from a man who probably regretted it the moment she left. But then Harrison would do something unexpected, like having her favorite lunch delivered when she worked through her break, or remembering she mentioned needing a specific research report and having it on her desk. The next morning with a handwritten note that simply said, "Thought this might help." It was the small things that undid her, not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but the quiet attention that showed he actually listened, actually cared. 3 weeks into their collaboration, Jessica found herself alone in the office at nearly midnight. The cleaning crew had already made their rounds, and the building had taken on that hollow quality that only empty skyscrapers possess. She was reviewing financial models on her laptop, her eyes burning from staring at numbers for the past 14 hours. "You're still here." Jessica jumped at the voice, her hand flying to her chest. Harrison stood in the doorway of the conference room, his tie loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly strong forearms. He looked exhausted, but somehow more real than she had ever seen him. Less like the polished CEO, and more like just a man at the end of a very long day. "I could say the same about you," Jessica replied, trying to calm her racing heart. "I thought you left hours ago." "I did," Harrison said, stepping into the room. "Got halfway home and realized I forgot something. Contracts for the Frankfurt office. Not that I couldn't have waited until morning, but sleeping has been difficult lately." Jessica knew she should leave that comment alone, should keep things strictly professional. But exhaustion had worn down her defenses, and curiosity got the better of her. "Why is sleeping difficult?" Harrison set the portfolio down and moved to the windows, looking out at the glittering cityscape, because my mind won't stop. It keeps replaying conversations, analyzing decisions, wondering what would happen if I finally stopped playing it safe. "Harrison Blake, afraid of risk?" Jessica said with a slight smile. "The man who built a billion-dollar empire by taking calculated chances?" "Business risk and personal risk are different," Harrison said quietly. "In business, I can analyze data, predict outcomes, minimize variables. With people, with feelings, there's no spreadsheet that tells you the right move. There's just fear and hope and the terrifying possibility that you might actually get what you want only to discover you don't know how to keep it." Jessica saved. Her work enclosed her laptop, giving him her full attention. "What do you want, Harrison?" He turned to face her, and in the dim lighting of the office, with his guard down and his vulnerability showing, He looked younger somehow, less like an untouchable billionaire, and more like someone who had been lonely for far too long. "The truth," he said. "I want to know what it's like to come home to someone who cares about my day, not my portfolio. I want to have dinner conversations about books and dreams instead of quarterly earnings. I want to feel something other than satisfaction when I close a deal. I want to matter to someone beyond what I can provide or achieve." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Want to know if you think about me the way I think about you? If you lie awake at night wondering what this could be if we were brave enough to find out?" Jessica's breath caught. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was dangerous territory. That office romances never ended well, especially when one person held all the power. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was singing a different tune entirely. "I do," she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Think about you, I mean. More than I should. More than is probably wise." Harrison closed the distance between them slowly, as if approaching something precious that might shatter if he moved too quickly. "Tell me about your father," he said unexpectedly. "You mentioned he had surgery. Is he okay now?" The question caught Jessica off guard. "He's better. It was heart surgery, triple bypass. Scary, but he came through it." "Why do you ask?" "'Cause I want to know you," Harrison said simply. "Not just the brilliant marketing director who challenges me in board meetings. I want to know the woman who sends money home every month, even though it means she lives in a studio apartment half the size of what she could afford. The woman who's terrified of thunderstorms. Where does that fear come from?" Jessica felt tears prick at her eyes. Nobody had asked her these questions in years. Nobody had cared to look beyond the professional facade she wore like armor. "I was 7, she said softly. "There was a terrible storm, and a tree fell on our neighbor's house. I watched from my window as they pulled the family out, and I was so scared that our house would be next, that I'd lose my parents, my little brother. Ever since then, storms make me feel like that 7-year-old girl again, helpless and afraid." Harrison's hand reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You're not helpless, Jessica. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You built yourself up from nothing just like I did. Maybe that's why I recognized something in you from the start. We speak the same language, you and I, the language of people who had to fight for everything they have." "Tell me about you," Jessica said, her voice steadying. "Everyone knows the official story. Poor kid from Brooklyn makes it big. But what's the real story? What made you so afraid to let anyone in?" Harrison's hand dropped, and for a moment Jessica thought she had pushed too far. But then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of old pain. "My father left when I was 8, he began. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep us afloat, and I watched her slowly break under the weight of it. By the time I was 16, she was so exhausted she could barely function. I swore then that I would never be poor again, never be powerless again, never depend on anyone who could just walk away." He moved back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. "I built Sterling Global by trusting numbers, not people. By keeping everyone at arm's length. I had relationships, if you can call them that. Women who wanted the lifestyle, the status, the money. But nobody who wanted me, just me, without all the trappings. Is that what you think I want?" Jessica asked quietly. "The money and status?" Harrison turned to look at her, and there was such raw honesty in his eyes that it took her breath away. "No, that's what terrifies me. I think you might actually want the broken parts, the messy parts, the parts I've spent 20 years hiding. And I don't know if I remember how to be that person anymore." Jessica stood and walked over to him, her heart pounding. She was crossing a line, breaking every rule she had set for herself, but in that moment, none of it mattered. "Maybe you don't have to remember," she said. "Maybe you just have to start fresh. Let someone see you, really see you, and discover that you're still here, still human, still capable of more than just closing deals and crushing competitors." Harrison's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that this was a mistake. But all he found was understanding, acceptance, and something that looked dangerously close to affection. "Jessica," he said, her name on his lips like a prayer and a warning all at once. "Harrison," she replied, reaching up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. "I'm scared too. This could ruin everything I've worked for. I'm tired of playing it safe. I'm tired of going home to an empty apartment and pretending I'm satisfied with just my career. I want more. I want real. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly as if savoring the contact. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. Everything changes. Then let it change, Jessica whispered. Harrison's hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his face. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out together, Jessica said. No spreadsheets, no calculated risks. It's just two people trying to find something real in a world that doesn't always make space for it. For a long moment, they stood there in the silent office, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. And then, slowly, carefully, Harrison leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. A gesture so tender it made Jessica's chest ache. This is insane, he murmured. Completely. She agreed. We could both lose. Everything. I know. But I can't seem to care about that right now. Neither can I. Pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. One rule, he said firmly. At work, we're professional. No favoritism, no special treatment. You earned your position through merit, and that doesn't change. If anything, I'll probably be harder on you than anyone else, just to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Jessica smiled despite the seriousness of the moment. I wouldn't expect anything less. And one rule from me. If this doesn't work, if we realize we made a mistake, we end it like adults. No drama, no destroying each other's careers out of spite. Agreed, Harrison said. He held out his hand, as if they were sealing a business deal. Partners? Jessica took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip. Partners, she confirmed. But instead of shaking, Harrison lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. A gesture so old-fashioned and unexpectedly romantic that Jessica felt her knees weaken. I should probably mention, Harrison said with the ghost of a smile, that I have no idea what I'm doing. I haven't been in a real relationship since college, and that ended badly enough that I've avoided them ever since. Well, I haven't been in a relationship in 3 years, Jessica admitted. My last boyfriend told me I was married to my job and left me for someone who actually had time for him. So we're both pretty terrible at this. Harrison laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that Jessica found herself laughing too. The tension that had been coiling between them for weeks began to ease, replaced by something lighter, something that felt almost like hope. We're quite a pair, Harrison said, still holding her hand. Two workaholics trying to figure out how to make time for each other while running a billion-dollar expansion project. We'll make it work, Jessica said with more confidence than she felt. We're both good at solving impossible problems. This is just another challenge. Except the stakes are higher, Harrison said seriously. Because if I mess this up, I'm not just losing a business opportunity. I'm losing you. Jessica squeezed his hand. Then don't mess it up. And I'll try not to mess it up either. Deal. Deal. They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to leave, both knowing that tomorrow everything would look different. The office would be full again. Colleagues would be watching. And they would have to navigate this new territory while maintaining the professional facade that both their careers demanded. But for now, in this quiet bubble of possibility, they were just two people taking a chance on something that scared them both. Jessica asked finally. Harrison nodded, reluctantly releasing her hand to gather his portfolio and her laptop bag. As they rode the elevator down 42 floors, standing shoulder to shoulder in the small space, Jessica felt the weight of what they had started settling over her. This was real now. This was happening. And there was no way to predict where it would lead. When they reached her car in the mostly empty parking garage, Harrison waited as she unlocked it and set her bag inside. Then, before she could second-guess herself, Jessica turned and rose up on her toes, pressing a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Harrison. His hand caught her waist, holding her there for just a second longer. Good night, Jessica. Drive safe. As she drove away, Jessica watched in her rearview mirror as Harrison stood there in the fluorescent lighting of the garage, his hand touching the spot where she had kissed him, looking more vulnerable and human than she had ever imagined possible. And she realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that she was falling for him, truly falling. And there was nothing calculated or safe about it. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of professional distance and stolen moments. At work, Harrison and Jessica maintained an almost exaggerated formality, their interactions crisp and business-focused. But after hours in quiet restaurants across town or during late-night walks through Central Park, they slowly peeled back the layers they had both spent years constructing. Jessica learned that. Harrison volunteered at a youth center in Brooklyn every month. Mentoring kids from the same neighborhood where he grew up, Harrison discovered that Jessica wrote poetry in a leather journal she kept hidden in her desk drawer. Words she had never shown anyone because vulnerability felt too dangerous in the corporate world they inhabited. They were building something real, something that felt both fragile and unshakable. But they both knew that secrets had a way of coming to light, and in the world of corporate politics, their relationship was a secret that wouldn't stay hidden forever. The unraveling began on a Tuesday morning when Harrison's executive assistant intercepted him before he could enter his office. "Mr. Blake, you have a visitor," she said, her voice tight with tension. "She's waiting in your office," she insisted. Harrison felt a cold dread settle in his stomach even before he opened the door. Standing by his window, perfectly poised in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, was Vanessa Whitmore, his ex-fiancée, the woman he had almost married 5 years ago, before discovering that she was more interested in his bank account than his heart. "Hello? Harrison," Vanessa said, turning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's been too long. Not long enough," Harrison replied coolly, closing the door behind him. "What are you doing here, Vanessa? Is that any way to greet an old friend?" She moved closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. "I heard through the grapevine that you're expanding into Europe. My firm specializes in international market consulting. I thought we could work together, for old time's sake." "We don't have old times," Harrison said flatly. "We have a past that's better left buried. And I already have a team handling the expansion." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Yes, I heard about your new director. Jessica Carter, isn't it? Rising star, very talented." She paused deliberately. "Very pretty, too. Tell me, Harrison, is this expansion project the only thing you're working on with her?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "My business relationships are none of your concern." "But they are," Vanessa said, pulling out her phone and tapping the screen. "You see, I have friends everywhere, including on your board of directors, and they're very concerned about potential conflicts of interest. Fraternization policies exist for a reason, darling." She held up the phone, showing a photo that made Harrison's blood run cold. It was him and Jessica having dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Queens, his hand covering hers on the table, both of them laughing at something. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. "Where did you get that?" Harrison asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Does it matter?" Vanessa shrugged. "What matters is that I have it, and so do several board members. They're planning to call an emergency meeting to discuss your inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Unless, of course, we can come to an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Vanessa moved closer, trailing a manicured finger down his lapel. "You bring me on as a consultant, pay my firm a generous retainer, and publicly distance yourself from Miss Carter. Fire her if you have to. Make it look like a budget cut or reorganization. In exchange, I'll make sure those photos disappear and convince the board that everything is perfectly professional." Harrison removed her hand from his jacket with deliberate care. "And if I refuse, then I'll make sure everyone knows that the great Harrison Blake is compromising his company's integrity for a pretty face. Your reputation will be damaged, hers will be destroyed, and the European expansion will collapse under the weight of the scandal. Is she really worth all that?" Before Harrison could respond, the door opened. Jessica stood there, her face pale, but her spine straight. She had clearly heard enough. "I'll make this easy for everyone," Jessica said, her voice steady despite the tremor Harrison could detect beneath it. "I resign, effective immediately. No scandal, no board meeting, No need for arrangements? Jessica, no, Harrison started, but she held up a hand. It's fine, she said, though her eyes told a different story. This was always going to be complicated. Better to end it now, before anyone else gets hurt. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor with terrible finality. Harrison stood frozen for a moment, torn between his instinct to protect her and his fury at being manipulated. Vanessa watched with satisfaction, clearly believing she had one. But as Harrison stared at that empty doorway, something inside him snapped. He thought about the man he had been for the past 20 years, calculating, controlled, always choosing the safe path. He thought about his mother, working herself to exhaustion because his father had walked away. He thought about every relationship he had sabotaged by keeping people at arm's length. And then he thought about Jessica, about her strength and her kindness, about the way she made him want to be more than just a successful businessman, about how she saw him, really saw him, and chose to stay anyway. Get out, Harrison said quietly to Vanessa. Excuse me? I said get out. His voice was steel now. You want to destroy my reputation? Go ahead and try. Release those photos? Call the board. Do whatever you think will hurt me. But know this. I will fight you with every resource I have. I will expose every shady deal your firm has ever made, every client you've manipulated, every lie you've told. And when I'm done, you'll wish you had never walked back into my life.
Nice.
Vanessa's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Try me, Harrison said. You taught me an important lesson 5 years ago, Vanessa. You taught me that some people see relationships as transactions. But Jessica taught me something more valuable. That real love means being willing to lose everything for the right person. And I'm done playing it safe. He strode past her, leaving his office, his company, everything he had built to chase the one thing that actually mattered. He found Jessica in the parking garage, throwing her belongings into her car with angry, jerky movements, tears streaming down her face. Jessica, wait. Don't, she said, not looking at him. Don't make this harder than it already is. We both knew this was a mistake from the beginning. I should never have let my feelings cloud my judgment. Wasn't a mistake, Harrison said, gently taking the box from her hands and setting it down. The mistake would be letting you walk away because I'm too afraid of what people might think. She'll destroy you, Jessica said, finally meeting his eyes. She'll destroy both of us. Your company, your reputation, everything you worked for. Then let her try, Harrison said. I spent 20 years building an empire because I thought success would fill the emptiness inside me. But all it did was make the hole bigger. You're the first person who made me feel whole, Jessica. The first person who made me want to come home at night. Do you really think I'm going to give that up to protect my image? But the board, your investors, they'll never accept this. Then I'll walk away, Harrison said simply. I'll resign as CEO, sell my shares, start over if I have to. Money can be rebuilt. Companies can be replaced. But you, Jessica Carter, you're irreplaceable. And I'm done pretending otherwise. Jessica stared at him, tears still falling, but now mixed with something that looked like hope. You can't mean that. Sterling Global is your life. It was my life, Harrison corrected. But I'm choosing a different life now. One where I don't have to hide what matters most. One where I can wake up next to the woman I love without worrying about board meetings and stockholder opinions. You love me? Jessica whispered. Harrison smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger, lighter, free. I love you. I think I've loved you since you challenged me in that first board meeting and refused to back down. I love your strength, your compassion, your terrible habit of working until midnight and forgetting to eat dinner. I love that you're scared of thunderstorms, but face down corporate sharks without flinching. I love everything about you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Jessica laughed through her tears, a sound of pure relief and joy. This is insane. You're throwing away everything for me. No, Harrison said, pulling her close. I'm finally choosing the right thing. Everything else was just noise and numbers. You're real. This is real. And I'd rather have real and messy than perfect and empty. What about Vanessa? The photos. Let her release them, Harrison said. Let the whole world see that I'm in love with the most brilliant, beautiful woman I've ever met. I'll hold a press conference if I have to. I'll tell everyone that, yes, I'm in a relationship with an employee, and yes, I'm willing to step down to avoid any conflict of interest, and no, I don't regret a single moment of it. Jessica pulled back to look at him, searching his face for doubt or hesitation, but all she found was certainty, the kind of certainty that came from finally knowing what truly mattered. You're serious? Completely? You'd really walk away from everything? For you? In a heartbeat? Jessica took a shaky breath, then smiled through her tears. You're not walking away from anything. We're going to fight this together. We'll face the board, deal with Vanessa, handle whatever comes. But we're doing it the right way, with transparency and dignity. No more hiding, no more secrets. Together? Harrison asked, hope flooding his features. Together, Jessica confirmed. But I have conditions. First, I want a formal review by an independent consultant to confirm that my promotion and my work on the European expansion were based on merit, not favoritism. Second, we establish clear boundaries at work and stick to them. And third, if there's a conflict of interest that can't be resolved, I transfer to a different department or even a different company. I won't let anyone say I slept my way to success. Harrison nodded, respect shining in his eyes. Done. All of it. Whatever it takes to do this right. And one more thing, Jessica said, stepping closer. No more walls, no more hiding behind that cold CEO persona. I want the real Harrison Blake, the man who volunteers in Brooklyn and quotes poetry he pretends not to read. Can you give me that? I can try, Harrison said softly. It might take time. 20 years of armor doesn't come off overnight. Then we'll take it slow, Jessica said. We'll figure it out together one day at a time. Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the last of her tears. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Jessica said with a watery laugh. But you're stuck with me anyway. And then, they're in the parking garage with the fluorescent lights, humming overhead and the sound of traffic echoing from the street above. Harrison Blake kissed Jessica Carter like she was the answer to every question he had been too afraid to ask. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and hope, like endings and beginnings, like everything he had been missing and everything he had finally found when they finally pulled apart. Jessica rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? Now, Harrison said, we go back upstairs. I call an emergency board meeting and tell them the truth, that I'm in a relationship with you, that it's serious, and that we're handling it with complete transparency. I'll offer to step back from day-to-day oversight of your projects, maybe even take a reduced role in the company if necessary, and then we deal with whatever consequences come. They might fire you. They might, Harrison agreed. But I'd rather be fired and have you than be CEO and alone. Jessica kissed him again quickly this time. For the record, I love you too. I probably shouldn't, and it definitely wasn't smart, but I do. You're stubborn and infuriating and way too used to getting your own way. But underneath all that ice, you're the most decent man I've ever known. Harrison smiled, truly smiled, and pulled her close. Come on, let's go face the music. They walked back into Sterling Global Tower hand in hand, both knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. The board meeting was contentious, with several members demanding Harrison's resignation. Vanessa tried to stir up scandal, but Harrison's transparency and Jessica's impeccable work record made it difficult for anyone to claim impropriety beyond the personal relationship. In the end, a compromise was reached. Jessica transferred to head up a new division focused on sustainable business practices, removing any direct reporting relationship with Harrison. An ethics committee was formed to review all high-level relationships going forward, and Harrison agreed to temporarily reduce his compensation and donate a significant portion to charity, demonstrating that he took the situation seriously. Vanessa's firm was quietly dropped from consideration for any future contracts after Harrison's legal team uncovered several questionable practices in her past dealings. She left New York shortly after, her reputation more damaged than his had ever been. 6 months later, The European expansion launched successfully, exceeding all projections. Jessica's new division was thriving. She had earned the respect of even the most skeptical board members through sheer competence and dedication. Harrison had learned to delegate more, to trust his team, and to leave the office at a reasonable hour most nights. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, not far from where Harrison had grown up. It needed work, but they spent weekends painting walls and planting a garden, building something together with their own hands. Harrison taught Jessica to read financial statements. Jessica taught Harrison to appreciate thunderstorms by sitting with him on the porch during summer rains, showing him that some things were beautiful precisely because they were wild and uncontrolled. On their one-year anniversary, Harrison took Jessica back to the parking garage where everything had nearly fallen apart. But this time, instead of tears and ultimatums, there was laughter in a small velvet box. "I know we said we'd take things slow," Harrison said, getting down on one knee under those same fluorescent lights, "but I've spent enough of my life being cautious. Jessica Carter, you taught me that the biggest risk is never taking one at all. Will you marry me?" Jessica pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. "You're doing this in a parking garage?" "It seemed appropriate," Harrison said with a grin. "This is where I almost lost you. Seemed like the right place to make sure I never let that happen again," as Jessica said, kissing him between words. "Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times, yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger, a simple emerald that matched her eyes, Harrison realized something profound. He had spent 20 years building an empire, accumulating wealth and power, believing that success was measured in quarterly reports and stock prices. But standing there with Jessica in his arms, he understood that he had been calculating the wrong things all along. True wealth wasn't in bank accounts or corporate holdings. It was in finding someone who saw past your defenses and loved you anyway. It was in building a life based on trust and honesty instead of transactions and appearances. It was in choosing love over fear, even when it meant risking everything. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," Jessica replied. "Even if you are terrible at picking romantic locations," Harrison laughed, the sound echoing through the empty garage. "Next time, I'll do better. I promise." "There better not be a next time," Jessica said, holding up her ring. "This is it for us. You and me. Forever. No matter what challenges come, no matter what," Harrison agreed. And as they walked out of that parking garage together, heading home to their brownstone and the life they were building one day at a time, both of them knew that the best investments weren't made in boardrooms or stock markets. They were made in quiet moments of vulnerability and choosing to trust when fear said to run. In believing that love was worth the risk, Harrison Blake had spent his life being replaceable to everyone around him, valued only for what he could provide or achieve. But Jessica had shown him something different. She had shown him that to the right person. He was irreplaceable not because of his wealth or power, but simply because he was himself, flawed and broken and trying his best to be better in that. Harrison realized as he squeezed Jessica's hand and felt her squeeze back, was the only success that truly mattered. Not the empire he had built, but the home he had found. Not the reputation he had protected, but the love he had been brave enough to choose. The story could have ended in that conference room all those months ago, with pride and fear winning out over possibility. But instead, it ended here, with two people who had learned that sometimes the most profitable investment you can make is in your own happiness, and that the only deal worth closing is the one that opens your heart. They had both been replaceable in the eyes of the world, but to each other, they were everything, and that made all the difference. Thank you for taking that time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.